Hi, welcome to the latest episode of NAMI-New York State Perspectives. I'm Matthew Shapiro.
And I'm Haley Amring.
So, Haley, I am so excited about this episode. I know this is one of our favorite conversations that we've had. So thrilled to talk to Jeremiah Brown, who was such a great guy. I mean, what a conversation that was. I mean, if you remember, I was like having such a bad day, and that conversation like totally invigorated me. But before we even get to Jeremiah, I just want to say too how much I enjoyed the last episode with you and Shade. You guys, it was such a enlightening conversation, and I just appreciate the two of you so much putting your truth out there and sharing your stories. It was very powerful.
Thanks so much, Matt. Yeah, I mean that's kind of what this perspectives atmosphere is all about, right? Being able to be vulnerable and share your experience and story as true as it is to you. So, I'm really excited for everyone to watch this episode. For those who don't know a little bit on Jeremiah Brown, he was a defensive back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And experienced a concussion, which led him ultimately to having to retire early because of the effects that it had on his brain and his mental health. But with that, Jeremiah used his superpower in a way, right, of experiencing that to be able to give it back to people. So he actually owns a nonprofit called L.E.A.D NYC. It focuses on being able to give educators, parents, and coaches the resources available to them to remind them that they're more than just the sport that they play. And I think it's so important being able to see each other as human beings above all else. He also is the author of a book called Lead Like a Champion. Definitely recommend giving that a read. Jeremiah is just such an incredible person, and I'm still absorbing everything he had to say even now.
Yeah, no, it was such an incredible conversation. We're really excited. The newest thing that we can add to Jeremiah's bio is that he's going to be one of the recipients of our 2023 Leader of Mental Health Awareness Awards to acknowledge the tremendous work he's doing with students in inner cities. And, he's L.E.A.D NYC, but he's taking his message all over the country right now. And I know people are going to be really excited. I think this conversation was so incredible, but it's the beginning of a conversation. We're so excited to have him at our 2023 conference. Our Time Prioritizing Mental Health in Today's World is going to kick off with an incredible panel discussion featuring Jeremiah, but we don't want to give too much away. We'll let Jeremiah speak for himself in this incredible conversation. So again, great job on the last episode, and enjoy this episode. Jeremiah, so grateful to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Excited to be here. Excited to learn and serve. So thank you. Thank you both.
Well, we're excited to learn from each other. And I've been so intrigued learning about your personal journey and your personal story, because in a lot of ways it mirrors so much of the stories we hear at NAMI, and taking, challenging events and things that some people might consider like tragic or unfortunate, and really taking that adversity on and turning it into like a gift and a way to help others. So can you kind of talk in your personal journey, how you've addressed the challenges and adversities, both during your NFL career and once it kind of ended prematurely, and how you've taken it beyond that?
Yeah, man, I'll say this, for me, everyone, for many years, I resented my village, if it was my parents or if it was my coaches. And I resented them out of ignorance, to be completely transparent. I wasn't aware of who I was, when I had to transition out of, playing sports professionally. And the reason why I resented them is because I just lacked information on who I was, what I wanted to do, what my gifts were outside of my sport. And that really, spun me down a really, really dark path of just depression, suicidal ideations, anxiety that I still deal with today. Just being hard on myself as a high performer. There are just so many things that come with playing sports at an extremely high level, right? In terms of the level of focus, attention to detail, and when you are no longer in that fast-paced environment, it's almost like, why are things moving so slow? For me, everyone's focus was on how my physical performance was. if that was how well I did on an exam, or what my grades were, or how fast I could run, in terms of the IQ, both in school and in the sport of football. But no one ever really took the time to focus on the EQ in terms of my emotional intelligence, and no one really took the time to really show me how to navigate a ton of the just experiences that I was going through, as a youth, as a young Black male, growing up in an environment where I watched my mother struggle, and I thought the only way I could get her out of the struggle was if I played a game of football, because it was the physical, right? And no one really just took the time to equip me with the tools, and the expectation was for me to just figure it out, right? Like, you have this money and you'll just figure it out, and it's never that easy, And for me, being in that dark place was really the start of who I've evolved into today, as a speaker, as a published author, as a mental health advocate, as someone who, if you asked me, you said, Jeremiah, what do you talk about? Right? Like, so you're a speaker, that sounds great, but like, what do you talk about? And for me, what I talk about is the power of leadership and how it directly connects to culture. When you think about any environment, if it's a low performing environment or a high performing environment, it's all about culture. It's all about what people value most, and one of the biggest things that I go into corporate organizations, K through 12 organizations, higher education, is to support them in understanding the importance of emotional intelligence, the importance of prioritizing your mental health, and how that will create a culture that people enjoy being a part of. I can kind of keep going and on about it, but hopefully, that lays just some groundwork of, where I started to where I am right now.
For sure. And Jeremiah, I want to acknowledge too, you kind of touched base on, you went through a lot of just adverse, dark challenges with the suicide ideation. And I'm wondering too, there was so much focus on not necessarily knowing who you were, what you were really going through. How did that transition, right, from professional football player, to the now current advocate? How did all of that impact your work, everything that you've gone through?
Oh man, it impacted it tremendously. I don't know if that's probably even a good enough word. It definitely is, the foundation of why I value, mental health and my mental health. And, for me, one thing that helped me just understand the importance of it was how sports is so much like, I guess, the real world, right? Where I no longer had a coach. I no longer was a part of a team. So all of the opportunities I had to let some of my emotions out, and do certain things that were therapeutic for me, not realizing that that's what was happening. But because I didn't have a coach, because I didn't have that locker room feeling, for a huge part, I felt lost. I felt alone. And that's what, for me, led to me having these suicidal ideations that, like, this world would be a better place without me in it. I truly believe that. And I believe that because there wasn't anyone telling me, like, hey, you made a bad play, but there's always the next play, and it's not anyone's fault. Like, they didn't know that I was honestly even going through this. Sometimes when my wife, been with her almost 15 years, she's been with me from college through the NFL, through some dark times to today, and sometimes she hears those stories like, wait, when did that happen? And when you talk about mental health, there are people who, they look like the shiniest car on the lot, but when you look under the hood, there's an engine missing, there's some parts missing, not from a psychological standpoint, but from just an emotional standpoint.
Yeah, it's so interesting, Jeremiah. I have not quite the same story as you do, but like last year, just about this time last year, I was in a really serious car accident and my hip was shattered in 9 pieces. And
Wow.
long story short, I was forced to take, a time out in life. Like, so much of my identity was wrapped up in being an advocate and in my work, and taking that away from me was hard. And some of the same things, maybe I would have been better, everyone would have been better if I didn't survive that accident and things like that when you go through that headspace and when so much of your identity is challenged by something you don't see coming. You're on
Right.
a path, the whole thing, and then you take a left turn and it kind of opens up what's already there, right? I think,
Right.
you're struggling
Right.
with a lot of these things beforehand, and it gives you,
Absolutely.
this opportunity. You have nothing to do but sit there, feel sorry for yourself and struggle with these things. And, it's interesting you mentioned your wife and how sometimes she didn't even notice some of these things. And, through my journey, I'm just so lucky to have friends. Actually, Haley, who knew I was struggling and sent me a book about cognitive behavioral therapy and things like that to really
That's
help me
awesome.
get me out of my rut. Yeah, but so I'm wondering, when you were going through those really dark that valley, right? That you were
Yes,
there.
sir.
I mean, what strategies and coping mechanisms did you use or found effective in overcoming those challenges? And how do you think those two can help young athletes who might be struggling with some of these things and kind of explaining that your whole identity might not be wrapped up in football or being an athlete? Two-part question.
Yeah, definitely multifaceted and layered, but I'll start here. The first thing is speak about it, pun intended, right? Me as a professional speaker now, I wasn't always a professional speaker. It wasn't something that I got paid to do, it wasn't something that I took seriously in terms of, finding a coach and getting coached and understanding that there's a business to, the speaking world, right? So for me, it started just talking about it consistently, to students. It wasn't necessarily structured, but that was therapeutic for me because it gave me purpose, in my pain, or I should say I found purpose in my pain, and me sharing that and being vulnerable with students and letting them know, like, hey, I know you want to go to the NFL or the MLB, and I know that in your mind you think that this is, the only thing you can do to add value to the world. And quite frankly, your entire identity is attached to this. But what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to go through what I went through. And I truly believe that, like I could have went into finance, I could have gone into so many different avenues of career, but I chose education because I knew it was an opportunity for me to give back the experience and the information that I was deprived of. And so speaking about it was extremely helpful, getting therapy, actually sitting down with a therapist and, and that wasn't easy at first, right? Like sometimes in the beginning, I felt everyone was judging me. I thought that there was some level of, like, man, you don't get me, you don't understand me. And it was really because I didn't understand what being vulnerable meant, and I don't know if that was because of the competitor in me. I didn't understand that when you're communicating with someone, it's a collaborative thing, and because I was such a high competitor, I looked at everyone as competition in the weirdest way, and just something that I can't really explain. But nonetheless, speaking about it definitely helped me. Definitely having a therapist. And then as I evolved over the years, and I really got clarity on, okay, like I don't necessarily want to be a teacher. I don't necessarily want to be a principal, but I do want to stay in education. Kind of bounced around trying to figure like, okay, what is my purpose? What is my identity? And I realized that um I was called a more difficult path in creating, what that would be. So now what that looks like for me as an adult is, still seeking therapy, going to conferences, going to different spaces where people are talking about mental health, and they're talking about it more now, publicly. There are a lot more just avenues and resources than there were 10 years ago. But I'm constantly looking to protect my peace by, like when we first got on the call, I said, I just want to be in a room to learn, and a huge part of that motivation is I just want to get in a room to protect my energy, because I know when I'm in the room with other individuals who also prioritize their mental health, then they're going to pour into me, in ways that price of admission, couldn't necessarily, be worth. So Yeah, it's a bunch of things, but I'd say just to kind of bring it all home, speaking about it is definitely important. You know, not keeping it bottled in, um, identifying who are the people that need to be in your village. You know, if it's a therapy, if it's therapists, if it's coaches, if it's mentors, if it's family members, just being extremely intentional on who you're around because any little thing can trigger, you know, emotions, you know, and if you're not around the right people, and sometimes the right people can trigger, you know, your emotions, you know, so it's one of those things where there is no right answer for everyone, you know.
Definitely. And you touch on something that I think is such an important NAMI concept. Again, a little bit about NAMI, I don't know how much you know, but we're really a peer-led organization. We're the biggest grassroots organization in the country dedicated to helping both individuals living with a mental illness as well as, their family members. And all of our courses are offered for free by people with lived experience. So if you're taking a family course, it's taught by a family member who's walked. If you've taken our peer-to-peer course, it's someone who's walk that road to recovery and can help guide you, help coach you, as like you say. But the biggest thing, and then you touch about it, is I kind of mentioned it on my first question, it's like you're so at the heart of what NAMI is, and that's taking our own tragedies and our own challenges and using them as a gift to help others. And to me, there's nothing more beautiful and worthwhile. Makes your own experiences and tough times worth it. Like you kind of say, we help others to help ourselves, and there's no greater gift that you can give.
Yeah, I have so much to touch base on, but I'm going to try to rein it in as best as I can. Jeremiah, I think, being able to speak up about it, you talk about that, and now it's a little bit easier for you to be vulnerable and practice that, but I know it wasn't always that way for you. And I'm sure even there are moments where it's hard, right? Because for me, absolutely, when I talk about and I think about vulnerability, right, it's essentially making a decision when you don't know what the outcome is going to be. So I, for one, really admire that you've gone out and that you've learned a lot about yourself, because it's not necessarily the easiest thing. But when I think about you as a leader, right, as someone that's a coach, especially within the Black community for these young students, I'm wondering if maybe you can touch base on what you've seen, what you've experienced within yourself or the community, really the specific cultural or societal factors that may contribute to mental health disparities within, the Black community, and how these can be addressed, I guess, within the context of sports, especially.
Well, let me say this. When you said making a decision when you don't know the outcome is vulnerability, that's a bar. I had to write that one down. That was good. That was good. So I'd say this, I even shared this for the first time in a TED Talk that I did recently. And I shared with the audience, I said, in my community, now this isn't something that's a new concept, but for me, it was the first time I ever was open enough to, talk about my community in its rawest form, where mental health was taboo, right? So like talking about mental health wasn't necessarily something that you were labeled soft. I don't know if that was an era that I grew up in or what, but it was, now it's different. Now it's just very, very different with the language that we have, right? Like emotional intelligence or social emotional awareness, all of these different things didn't exist, in our textbooks or just in the games we played and the way we conversed with one another. So like in my community specifically, and in many, growing up, in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, growing up in an environment where, it was the closest thing to the projects, right? Like it was, your drug dealers on the block. It was, one, for the most part, one parent household. And growing up, if you had emotions that were outside of let's make money, or or even if you were emotional about making money, you were looked at as less than. And I want to say what that did was it created these defense mechanisms for me specifically, where I didn't feel like there was a safe space that I could express how I was feeling, even if it was in school, at home, outside playing with my friends, in any of those spaces, there wasn't a place, because if I told my coaches that I was feeling sad about something or feeling a certain way, I might be afraid that they wouldn't play me, because I might not be tough enough, or if I'm at home, there wasn't anyone that I could go to, because my father was dealing with drug and alcohol abuse, right? So he was battling with his own mental health, addiction, addictions, and he needed help that he was, and because my father never fully explained what was happening, we saw it, but he never like said like, hey, I'm struggling with this and I need to go get help. I'm either choosing not to. There was just so many different gaps just in my community and even in my household, to where I never saw my mother cry before. Like I want to say the first time I saw my mother cry, I was 17 years old, and that was because my uncle had passed away. And it was like one tear, and in her eyes, it was, I need to be strong for my babies. And as I've done this root work of mental health, one of the best things she could have done was to cry and express that she wasn't okay, but because she held that in, I felt that that was the way you were supposed to do it, so um I'd say this, there we were taught many things, in my community, just how to properly communicate how you're feeling, most importantly understanding how to identify what you're feeling, um, were two things that just never happened, so as a result, when I could no longer play my sport, when I, went from making hundreds of thousands of dollars, signing $1 million contract, and the whole neighborhood is like, you're our hero, to, now you failed us, like having the people you grew up with tell you that, like, look, like, you're our hero, like, you're the man, we made it, let's go. And then you can no longer play. And it's like, man, you failed us. Like, how could you come back home? And having to like swallow that and not communicate something to them that they wouldn't necessarily understand was very, very difficult for me, so um I was deprived of many things. Love wasn't one of them. I don't know how to properly say if it was tough love or if it was warm and fuzzy love, but uh yeah, so hopefully that answered your question, but that was a great question that really kind of made me think about just where I was, as a child.
Wow, there's so much to unpack right there. I think so much of it, it's like we follow those who lead us, like
Yep.
our parents. And again, I think I come from a family too where there's been depression all over my family, but like my father, my grandfather, they wouldn't show that vulnerability and let you know that it's okay to be weak. And then I think when my grandfather finally saw me struggling, he admitted his own vulnerability. So it's so important that we, those who lead us are how we follow in some ways, which kind of gets us right into what
Absolutely.
you're doing with Lead NYC. So the first question I had from the last thing you said is, I definitely want to learn more about what you're doing with Lead New York City and how you're leading by example. But touch on
Sure.
something else that I really want to add. I've always wanted to ask a professional athlete this. Like they said, like one of the worst things you can ever do to somebody is take someone who's poor and give them $1 million and see what happens. Like when that happened, you became a hero to your community. I'm sure it was more than, I'm sure you have people looking for some support, looking for handouts. You're now the man in your community. That's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
Responsibility is not even the right word. Really, more of a burden, I would imagine. So, I'm kind of curious about that experience, and then want to learn more about what you're doing with Lead NYC.
Yeah, man, that's an incredible question, because there are family members that didn't really have a close relationship with growing up, either because we were raised in different states that, the moment I signed that deal, it was like, hey, what's up, family? And you could kind of see it, but the love was just so overwhelming that, very, I mean, you always push away hate, or you try to, but when the love comes, very rarely you're gonna say, oh no, I don't want you to love on me. I don't want you to love on me. I don't, you know. So for me, it was just like I can see what's happening, but I guess I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. And then it wasn't until the doctor told me I could no longer play the game anymore, to where everyone that was showing me all this love, some of them I haven't spoken to since then, right? It's been about 11 years, and you know, we haven't had a conversation. There wasn't a check-in. Hey, cuz, how you doing? You know, hey, family, how you doing? You know, and for me, that was extremely tough, you know, because it was like, man, I'm really alone, you know, like they tell you, and it wasn't like I was just like handing out money, like here, take that. I didn't sign a forever deal. You know, I signed a undrafted free agent, rookie minimum. You know, it was $1 million contract, but and I was making way more money than my entire family. But it wasn't to the degree where it was like, okay, Jeremiah has made forever money and he's good for life. It was, and not that I even understood that at that time because I was making so much money, but the toughest aspect of that was, you know, and there are family members to this day that I don't have a good relationship with because they felt, you know, like you owe me. And it was like without saying, you know, and because they never received a piece of whatever that pie was, there was some level of resentment, you know, that I had to really navigate through. So that was actually one of the toughest things. And I've heard that saying before, you know, like never give, like the worst thing you can do for someone who's growing up in poverty or poor, like $1 million. And it's not even really about the lack of financial literacy. Like that is a part of it, like 100%. Can definitely couldn't say that I knew what to do with the money. I ended up having a good village of people that helped me understand, like, okay, you need to get a job. Okay, you need to invest in property. You need to do certain things so that this can turn into forever money. And I'm forever grateful for that. And as a result of making those smart decisions, there wasn't any money to go around to my family, you know, to even take my mom out of the hood, you know, when I go back home, right back in the neighborhood, you know, and I'm seeing the same people, you know, and for many years it was very difficult for me to navigate that, where it's like, man, like you actually made it, bro, but it's like you still here. That's what they see, you know. And I've always been someone to live under my means, you know, so you know, nonetheless, man, it I'd say the financial literacy aspect of it is probably what most people focus on when they say that saying. But I would say the emotional impact that it has on a professional athlete is probably far greater. And I believe that emotional impact is probably what leads to, you know, living outside your means and the overspending. So that is what really led me into my passion and purpose in my organization, L.E.A.D. So we've evolved over the years, you know, and we are currently still branded as the L.E.A.D NYC. But as you can see, I'm in Seattle, Washington. You know, I've been in Mexico, Dominican Republic. I mean, I've been all over, you know, and God's really, really blessed me with the ability to use my voice and to share my story, and in the process, you know, build this organization, you know, from the ground up. And the premise of my organization, of what we've evolved into, is not just L.E.A.D NYC, but we are the L.E.A.D company, you know, and essentially what we do at L.E.A.D is we help organizations develop their most important asset, which is their people, you know, and we do that by helping them understand how to prioritize their mental health. You know, how can we get people within any organization to feel supported, to feel heard, to feel seen, and help create and cultivate an environment where they enjoy coming to work every day, or coming to school every day, or coming to practice every day, you know. And I believe that when you can do that, that's a very tough task for any organization, because at the end of the day, if you are a college football coach, you have to win games, right? Like it just is what it is. Like to keep your job, you have to win games. The higher you go up, the more the win column counts and the amount of money you get paid is associated to that. In education, the IQ of a student has always been the priority. They are weaving in, you know, vocabulary words like social emotional awareness and social emotional learning. But at the end of the day, I've been an educator. I understand that most educators, when they are told they have to talk about SEL, they're like, man, this is more work, and it really takes a village, so I've really taken on that consulting and coaching lens, and that's essentially, like what we do, so we have 3 initiatives that drive our mission at LEAD. We have the LEAD Athletics, which is our health and wellness, initiative where, we provide schools with, certified coaches. We support from a nutritional standpoint and guidance. We support from, navigating the college recruiting process, particularly for like student athletes. We have the LEAD Academy, which is our leadership and character development, also our college and career readiness curriculum, where we support students and athletes on, navigating the nuances of what it means to be a successful student, what it means to be a successful athlete. And then we have what's called the LEAD coaching. And the LEAD coaching is pretty much my full-time job, just in terms of the work that I do in terms of consulting and coaching professional athletes, professional leaders in the K through 12 space, in the higher education space, or even the corporate space, so we have a team of employees, we have a staff of about 15, and essentially what that looks like is wherever there's a need, there's a way, and we provide that support, all things rooted in leadership, culture, and mental health.
So incredible and so needed. Just like I'm floored.
Where there's a lead, there's a way. That's the highlight of the episode. If anyone hasn't taken anything else away from it. But no, Jeremiah, I think that was really well put too. And I mean, when you think about it too, you've touched base on a lot of key things, right, that have helped with your recovery and being able to kind of pay it forward. So I know community support has been really big for you. And also being able to, just speak about it and having that type of environment. So I'm wondering too, now that kind of the tables have turned, right? You're not so much that student anymore, but now that you're a coach and you're, teaching and you're passing on the knowledge that you've experienced and learned, I'm wondering from your own perspective, how can coaches, teammates, and mentors, how can they contribute to having a successful support system for each other? How can they be able to create just that inclusive environment that prioritizes the mental well-being of their students and athletes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's incredible. Many layers to that, and I'll try my best to stay focused in answering that. But I always tell coaches this, and it's very similar to industry leaders in the corporate space or, school administrators. It's very similar. But I always tell coaches this. I say, if you want the most out of your athlete on the field, there's a reason why the Nick Sabans and the Bill Belichicks and the Phil Jacksons have had and sustained success over the years in their specific sport. And it is because all 3 have one thing in common. They prioritize the personal development of their players. And by developing the person, you get more return on the athlete. So when you take that analogy and you look at a teacher, who is exhausted and oftentimes overworked, and you lead with, hey, what do you need from me today? As opposed to like, I need you to get this done plus everything else. It shifts the whole dynamic of how this teacher shows up, because it releases, the anxiety of, like, wow, you even when you may not even have the time to fulfill the need, but the fact that you took the time to understand and see that there is a need, it changes the game when you talk about just workplace culture in general, So for me, my advice to coaches at any level, in any space, is if you want more productivity out of your workers, it starts with where they're at mentally and how they see the work, how they see the space, how they see you as their leader, and it's not easy. It's really not easy because many of us, and I say us is me included, is we are conditioned a certain way, from our upbringing, and we've reached a high level of success, doing it one way. But one thing which helps me with my mental health is we are no longer in 2012. We are no longer in 2002. We are no longer in 1990, right? So because we are ever evolving, the way we go about things must also evolve. And if there's one thing that's getting more and more complex with the world that we live in is information overload. It's just information overload. So when someone is overwhelmed with information, they're no longer processing things. So I know for myself what has helped me, and these are some of the examples and stories that I tell, in my presentations or in my workshops or keynotes, is this. Because I had imposter syndrome for so long. And I've been studying about just the whole concept of imposter syndrome and how it impacts people mentally and emotionally. And at one part, I thought that imposter syndrome was like something that like a small percentage of people have, but it's actually a societal norm now, where most people in space, they feel like not enough because they're asked to do more than what they have the mental capacity to actually facilitate. So for myself, what helps me is I know that there's always something to learn. I know that there's always something that I can do to grow. Yeah, I played in the NFL. Yeah, I've been an educator for over 10 years. Yeah, I get paid to speak, and I travel the country and the world to do that. And there's a level of mastery that comes with that. There's a level of, oh man, you live a great life. But and I'm struggling just like the next person, in my own way, So what helps me connect with my audience, because it is a very, very tough task to do what you just asked me, Haley, like, how do I, give that advice? Is I'm just extremely vulnerable, in sharing with them, like, look, I'm not going to get up here and tell you to be a better leader and not focus on mental health just because. I'm actually going to tell you this because in 2017, 80% of my staff left. Like when 80% of your staff leaves, it's not a them problem, it's a you problem as a leader, and I had to do some internal work because I wasn't healed. I was literally, as they say, I was eating my teachers, in terms of, I wasn't necessarily taking care of them, so you take care of their mental health, you give them the tools on how they can also take care of their mental health and create those boundaries, then you're going to get a return on that investment for sure.
Something you said that I just keep thinking in my head listening to this, give a shout out to our boss, Sharon, who, kind of our coach. And, the thing that she always says is the biggest problem we have in society, whether you're a leader or whatever, is we stop viewing people as people, right? You view, if you're a coach, you view them as an athlete and not the person. It was really interesting talking about those three coaches. And now, especially like Belichick, that's someone you think of as being warm and fuzzy. Obviously, Phil Jackson's a little different, kind of the Zen master, but
Right.
that importance of viewing people as people and not
People.
not something, a pawn or an athlete or something to help advance you. It's such an important concept. I think we've come so far from that in so many different ways. A lot with social media, I think is made us more distant. Obviously, the political discourse in the country right now, we look at each other as rivals and not here to help each other. So, breaking that mold, and I think that's like the key to leadership really is seeing people as people, and man, you touched on that so beautifully. So just
Thank you.
wrapping up, man, I feel like this is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of it, and we're going to
Yeah.
continue and keep learning from each other because one of my sayings, Haley hears this all the time: the day you stop learning is the day you stop living. So,
Absolutely.
I think we have so
Absolutely.
much more of this conversation to go. But
I
just
got my notes here.
there you go. And, as the show is perspectives, and we always kind of like to end on getting someone's real perspective on the big issue, and really just kind of wrapping up. We'll go, what is the message that you want to convey, not to just maybe young Black athletes, but young Black men and women who may be facing adversity as a whole? I mean, we know, you know, in a lot in urban cultures, there is that devaluing of mental health. Like we both talked about our fathers and not showing vulnerability, and how
Right.
shocking it was, for your mom. So to finally show that, and we know that those conversations aren't taking place the way they should be, and that's why we're so grateful to have leaders like you who are breaking down those walls and introducing these conversations that need to take place. So, what would you say to someone who's struggling, a young Black man, Black woman who's facing adversity in their personal life? I mean, what, based on your experiences, what's the best advice you would give them? What's your perspective?
My perspective is this, your life matters, and this world is full of problems that exist. And oftentimes the media and sometimes our own default, we tend to focus on what's in front of us, and that's the problem. Instead of looking inside of us and knowing that we're the solution to many problems that exist in this world. And when you begin to see yourself as a solution to a problem, and understand that you are the solution because of your own pain, because of your own scars, because of all of the things that you've gone through, it reminds you that the storm that we all face is a storm that was sent to develop us and not destroy us. And if there's anything that I could tell anyone who's battling with any mental health, and they aren't in an environment where they have a village of people who know how to prioritize their mental health, is you are a seed that is planted in an environment that won't allow you to grow the way you were destined to grow. So the anxiety, the depression, and all of the things that you're experiencing, and you may feel alone, is because of where you're planted. And I want to encourage you, to, unplant yourself, unplant your feet from where you are. And you may say, Jeremiah, well, this is where I live. This is where, I have to raise my family. I live in New York City, I live in L.A. It's extremely expensive, and we're just blessed that we have a home. I'd say this: there are many resources, that you can reach out to and seek and be a part of. It's just going to be uncomfortable, and it's in that uncomfort that you're going to grow, into, who you are destined to grow into. So don't let this storm defeat you. Let it develop you. Let it sharpen the tools that you have. And then before you know it, you'll be solving problems in this world in a way that people are going to pay you thousands and millions of dollars, and the impact is going to be millions of people. So, that's how I process this world now. When things get really, really difficult and I'm so uncomfortable, I say, okay, something good's coming, you know, um, something's good is coming. And if I stop now, I won't get there, so don't stop now. Don't stop, keep going. And hopefully these words, help you see that you're the solution to a problem that exists.
Seek out spaces that are uncomfortable. That's where you'll thrive, and seek those out. And that's so important. And I know we're basically out of time. I can't tell you, Jeremiah, how much I appreciate this conversation. You're the epitome of something else we talk about at NAMI all the time, that hope starts with you. If you don't have that village, start the village. And that's what you've done, man. And just, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this conversation, how much we appreciate you. And like I say, I feel, even though we're wrapping up this part of the conversation, I feel like it's just beginning to. And hopefully, looking forward to learning and growing together and supporting each other in this great mission that we're both on. And you're just such a shining
Absolutely.
example of it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Matthew and Haley. Thank you. Incredible questions. I'm just so happy that we were able to get the schedules aligned and make it work. And yeah, I'm just really excited to continue to be a part of this conversation with you both.